Welcome back, everyone, for the third and final talk of day one here at BrowserStack Summer of Learning. Before we start, quick housekeeping items for those of you who are just joining us. David will be taking questions at the end of his talk. We encourage you to ask your questions using the Q&A button on Zoom. Ask them as and when they come up, and we'll make sure they get answered at the end. All talks are being recorded and will be shared after the two-day event. With that out of the way, it is my pleasure to introduce our very own David Burns. David Burns is core contributor to Selenium, chairperson for the W3C Browser Testing and Tools Working Group, editor of the W3C WebDriver specification, and head of open source at BrowserStack. David likes to spend his time solving hard problems and working on different tools and frameworks. He has authored multiple guides on getting started with Selenium. So do check those out. David, over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Jay. It's really okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to try my best today to kind of walk you through some Selenium and kind of by the end of it, hopefully you would have learned something about kind of how to get started, how to get moving. And then at the end, there's going to be some of the future, kind of like how Amir did his talk, which was very good. With that, I will get started. As we go through this, I'm going to be focusing purely on Java. Previous talks I've done with Python. And next week I'm going to be doing some JavaScript, but like today's going to be Java. And so do ask questions as you go ahead. I probably would have shortcutted something. So if that is the case, do ask questions and Jay will collect them and we can go from there. Cool. So this is me and what we're going to be talking about. I'm not going to dive into what I am because I think Jay's done a very good talk about that already. But the main thing for me is I work on Selenium as part of my job here at BrowserStack, but also kind of helping out on projects like Appium and other things. So it's not just Selenium. Because I truly care about how the web works and how kind of the quality of the web. It's why I worked for Mozilla for so long and why I'm now at BrowserStack, just to kind of really push on it because a healthy web is good for everyone. So I'm going to go, this is the agenda. I've done the introduction. I'm going to give a brief explanation about Selenium, especially for those who kind of might be coming from more of a Cypress background or a Playwright background, Puppeteer background, because like I'm going to just go for the lowest common denominator. I'll talk through how I've set up a project, how to set up tests, see about running some tests. So I'm going to show you some things. The future is the really exciting part that I'm looking forward to the most to get to. And then hopefully at the end, I will answer some questions. And if I don't get to your questions, hopefully I can work with Jay and the rest to answer some of your questions through a blog post or something like that. So don't worry if I don't get to your questions today. So we'll make sure that everyone is sorted. So what is Selenium? I think most people know it nowadays, but it's not always the case. Oh, I forgot to remove a bullet point. Selenium is a browser automation framework. It is not a testing tool, even though like most people here who kind of use Selenium or have heard of Selenium always think of it from its testing context. It was always created and is still maintained in a way that it is a browser automation framework, even though 90% of its use case is probably around testing. At the heart of it, it is supported by browser vendors. So by Google, by Apple, by Mozilla, and by Microsoft. They invest into it. And they do this through the W3C. So I chair the working group, which is an open working group, which like if there is any browser automation framework out there, if they want to be involved, it is open, and we don't do anything behind closed doors. And so it allows us to create tooling that can kind of work with everyone and anyone. And so Google heavily invest into it, Apple do, so do Mozilla, and you can always see how each of the browsers are doing through a website called wpt.fyi. It gives you a whole bunch of test results for all different browsers and all the standards that go against it. Selenium works against mobile browsers as well as desktop. This is more important nowadays as we kind of dive into the future. Mobile is definitely one of the key factors that people think about as we go do the work that we do. It's important that we kind of also care about it, because like there are times where your customers might not be on iPhone 12s or the latest Android device, and their experience would be slightly different to everyone else's. And so through Google and through Mozilla and through Apple, there are ways to test against your mobile browser. Microsoft using Chromium as under the hood, they're already supported by the work that Google did previously. So kind of it's all there. Selenium is really good in that it has multiple language support. So kind of if we look at some of the other frameworks out there, they're either kind of based in one language. Well, actually, they are just mostly based in one language. Some of them are kind of branching out into it, and I'm really thankful for the work that they're doing in that, because I think choice in this matter is really important, because for some people, they find JavaScript can have a high or a very steep learning curve. So work with what you have and work with the teams and what they have. So kind of it's about, like I say, it's about bringing everyone to the table and improving the quality of the web. That's what we want to do. And so that is what Selenium is at its core. And so with that, because we roughly know that it's a browser automation framework, I'm going to deep dive into getting a project set up. For this, in this example, I'm going to be using IntelliJ IDE. It's my IDEA. It's my favorite Java IDE. It's very, very good. We're going to use Git, obviously, so there's a repository there. Java 11 or later. I appreciate some people don't always have that choice, especially if you're working in an enterprise stage. We need a build tool. So in this case, the examples that I'm going to be showing you, you can, if you use that repository, you can either build it with Maven or Gradle, but like you can use it. And we need a website to test against, which is important. Cool. So with that, I'm just going to pop out and we will have a look at some of the code. So sorry, there we go. So this is the repository. Like I've checked all the repository out, and we're going to load this up. Sorry. So if you're working with Java, Java can be very heavy in some senses, but in other senses, like, you know, like if you use Gradle, or if you use Maven, so the pom.xml is Maven, or the build.gradle is.
Hey, David, do you mind maximizing?
Oh, yes, of course.
Request.
Sorry. And you. Maybe if I do, sorry, let's see if this will work. Oh no, that's not working. Let's see if I can window. I just wanted to see if I can zoom in, but I can't seem to zoom in, which is really weird. The way the code looks is less important, but this is just kind of showing that, you know, we can set our dependencies, we can download them. So if you're coming from a JavaScript world, this is kind of a lot like your package.json file, and it's really like you just go, I need the following, and you're away you go. And so this is a Gradle script. Gradle allows you to build quicker and not have to rely on things. Maven does this similar to Gradle, but doesn't have some of those like little speed ups that Gradle has invested in, which is very, very good. I really like Gradle. I said the other day that I didn't, but it's actually grown on me very quickly. So yeah, so this is have this when you kind of run these things, because it's an IDE, we have, and I'm hoping this is going to come across in the video. You have this ability, which if it loads, to just kind of reload projects. And yeah, we have the reload project, which will then go get all your dependencies. You don't have to worry about it. And now you're ready to go, really exciting. And we can kind of get everything in place. I'm not going to do this now, but I have done it in the past. And when that happens, very simply, you've got all your, like the external libraries tells you your dependencies and anything that is needed. And away we go. So with that in mind, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is having a look at what is kind of the core principles about setting this up. And so some companies, they've set all this up for themselves. There's the examples direct repository, which I'm using just because we need to, there's a time limit on how much I can speak today, which I'm fine about. But like, it has some of these, utils, has these ways of kind of setting up your browsers. This is important for how you use it, because like you want to be able to make sure that on certain devices you can kind of run not devices, on certain operating systems, because one of the key principles that Selenium has always been very proud of is multiple language support, but also multiple operating system support. So if you want to run something on Windows, you can. If you want to run something on Linux, you can, and if you want to run something on Mac, you can. Unfortunately, each of them have their own unique characteristics about how you kind of call certain files, but it's not a major thing. But this is how we're going to be setting it up. And with this, I'm just going to kind of go back to the slides and just make more to make sure. So we have this, and so once we've got all of these things in place, we can have a look at how to go about writing our tests. Because this is Java, we kind of, there are, it's going to have a lot of boilerplates, but that's just what Java is. But we can kind of, like, if you use things like Groovy, which is based, uses the JVM, so the Java virtual machine under the hood, or Kotlin and things like that, a lot of the boilerplate disappears. But in this case, I've just used pure Java. And so we're going to kind of move on to looking at our tests, which are in here. And so in this case, we've broken it down into different things. Like in the Cypress talk, it was kind of showcasing about the idea of these end-to-end tests. but there's the also idea of sometimes you don't want a full end-to-end test. You just want to test certain pages for certain things instead of like full workflows. And I'm going to just load up the login test, and I will try explain all the different parts so that you can kind of have a look at it. So this website, so just for clarity, and I'm sorry for bouncing around, is we're going to be, we're just going to be having a look at this, testing this website. So this is a BrowserStack demo website, and it allows you to kind of run some tests and against it just to see how things are. So in this case, we're going to do a login test, which is, can we go here, log in, and move on through the test. And so just to go back to the slightly bigger test, there's, because we want to make sure that our tests are like, we have multiple tests. We're not just going to be testing happy parts, but we want to test that, like, if we try log in with the wrong password, it's going to fail and we're going to get an invalid password. When it passes, that we kind of make sure that the area that's got our username after you logged in is still is using the right user. Or if we try user that like has had too many account logins, that we get the right stance. So kind of, this is, you know, how most people do it, but in this case, we're not really testing a full end-to-end workflow. We're just testing kind of these key parts to a website, and we're going to be testing against this, against like a real browser. This is one of the key parts whenever you're testing, is like Amir kind of pointed out in the Cypress talk, is that you, if you're using a virtual DOM or in some cases headless, you're not actually getting the same feel. And sometimes browsers act very differently when they're like visible to you and when they're not visible to you. And so we need to be very aware about how we do that. With Java, when it comes to writing a test, we have the test annotation that just says this method is can be used. We can simplify these tests if we really wanted to kind of like, instead of always doing get driver, we could do that at a setup and then use it throughout the whole document, or however we want to like set that up. And we can create base classes that allow us to kind of do some of the setup for us. So we can just go ahead and do things. And so I'm just gonna, I know Jay had asked me to get it big, but I just want to go to something slightly smaller, just so I can kind of hopefully show you an example of how you would do it. Because like when running tests, we want to be able to run this in a CI environment, or you also want to be able to run this in your IDE, because like there might be times where you want to debug your code. I know I've had many tests where I've written it and then kind of spend like the next hour in a debugger because I've done something really, really silly. And I do that quite often. So it's nothing too different. But that's, you know, for these cases, it's, again, you can just like, because we're the way it's been set up, I will hopefully do that. And oh, there we are. So in the bottom here, you'll see some things changing. That's just showing that it's starting up. I'm hoping, yes, it picked the right window. This is not always the case when I try showcase people, but in this case, we've got a fairly quick test to show that a user was locked, that our assertions worked. after it navigating through different parts of the page. Great. So just go back here. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm not skipping anything. Right. The next part I was going to start showcasing, and I will expand the window, is when we need to do end-to-end tests. And hopefully this is visible. I will try again and see if I can zoom. No. Oh, okay. Is that when writing tests in kind of things, is that we try create abstractions that simplify our tests. There is a commonly known design pattern in Selenium called page objects, but this is not the only design pattern that people can follow. It's the one that most people follow, which allows you to create a page like an object. And so if I load this, it creates a page that you can just go, all right, if I ever need to access this page, these are the things that I want it to do for me, and simplify things. So like our test is going to return a confirmation page. We know that we want to start on a home page because where else would you start, really? And that when we want to log in, that we return a page, and that if we're already logged in, that there might be cases where we want to add something to a cart. We want to access different parts of the page, and we can simplify a lot of our code so that when something changes, for example, like say we have multiple tests, end-to-end tests that rely on how the login page looks. And then people go and redesign it. This is a common thing. And then people forget to fix their UI tests. And they go, oh no, everything's gone wrong. The CI is red, like all our tests. And normally, if you've designed your abstraction nicely so that you don't have these what kind of is commonly known as a God object, where this was the original Selenium, and there are other browser automation frameworks that kind of have this God object where you just have browser and does all these things. This way you can kind of just go oh, I just need to change this locator. And so in this case, we have locators. This is done in XPath. In the login test, we have CSS selectors. You could use an ID of an element. Because you have all these different ways, if something were to change, like in this case, I would have to do, say, username and password changed. So I can't change it at the moment, but if you kind of just imagine, we would have to do loads of work with page objects. That kind of need just disappears because we would change it once there, and say we had multiple tests, where we want different types of devices, suddenly they would be added. Or if I added another device, it could be added quite quickly. And so when we get this, we your tests are so much easier to read. So I know there's a lot of people quite like Cucumber and things like this, APIs like that or tooling like that. Me personally, if I have a Fluent API like this, so Fluent is that it just kind of has a dot and you just follow, or you just have kind of a nicely written DSL, domain specific language, you can kind of see what the person's meaning without having to kind of deep dive into other tooling. And you can just go, I want this, and it does it. And so like I could run this test now. And so just right click. Just gonna come out of it just so we can do that. And so I know there was a lot of flashing there. And hopefully you got to see that there were 3 items in the cart. And so we were able to add these with a really, like I say, with a really nice written out test that is simple, that we can just go ahead and we can just use. Now, in this case, like I'm very fortunate that I have a Mac, but I can test on Safari devices really easily. Oh, Safari really easily. I can test on Firefox really easy, Chrome really easy. And I know that like other frameworks, they always kind of mention, oh, do you really need IE? IE is still important to enterprise customers. It's still kind of heavily used if you're the Salesforces of the world, or kind of the Googles of the world, where you need to be able to develop your software and kind of share it out and still make sure that it works on Internet Explorer. And Internet Explorer doesn't have because it got stopped being developed on, but like it doesn't have things that like web components can do, or it doesn't have certain APIs like fetch that can work on a page. So sometimes you have to like know your target audience and be able to run against it, and it's really important that we fully understand it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to showcase like setting up my API keys. Don't worry, folks, I'm going to reset all my API keys straight after this talk, so you won't be able to use them. And then how to view tests, and the key part here is how to run tests in parallel. Because I'm sure we've all had the case where we've written tons and tons of tests, and then we've tried to run them, and we run them sequentially, and it all goes wrong. Or it takes like 4 hours, or I've even heard of people like, oh yeah, we only run our tests on the weekend because it takes all weekend to run them. So running tests in parallel is important, I think, because kind of people care about how we go about doing that. So I'm going to do some of this stuff, and in this case, it's going to be really, really simple for us to kind of just do. So if I load up InsetJ, maximize it so that you can all see. Just going to load up a terminal. So in this case, so I'm going to, so the way this is all set up, and if I think it's in here. Yeah, so what we're going to be doing is just setting up the, oh, it's that one. Oh, no. So the way the code is set up in the test base file, And again, all of this code is up on GitHub, so like don't worry if you can't keep up at the moment. We're going to look for an environment variable. So in this case, it'll be so I'm exporting, and this is my environment variable, which is BrowserStack username, and BrowserStack _ username, and David Burns. And then we're going to have a look at the access key. So I'm just going to press enter on that one. And if oh, wrong one. Oh, did I close the wrong tab? Sorry. I forgot I closed the wrong window. So we'll go back to there, and I will load up BrowserStack. Oh, what? .com. Let's just there we are. Don't know what I typed incorrectly the last time. So so this is my account. I'm just going to set the filter to me, so later on we can. So this is one I did yesterday. Obviously, I've got to make sure that because the demo daemons never work for me. They always work against me, I should say. So this is going to be my access key. I'm going to just copy this and load up here. And then I will export access key, but that's an old one, so we've got to put the new one. Okay. And just for kind of simplicity, again, I'm just going to use my history, but what I'm doing is I'm using some of the build targets that are in here. And if we scroll down, and sorry for scrolling so quickly, is that I can kind of run like this is this profile is a in Maven talk, a profile is just a build target that we're going to use. And so we can run, I think there's a bstack parallel, and there's a, oh, I always type the wrong thing. No, that's not it either. F, that's it. So I was going for F, I promise. And a bstack single. So if I were to run this, which I would do, so I'll just, in this case, I'm just going to copy it, but it's Maven -p, because that's my profile, and missing this. And so if I run it, made sure that everything's compiling, it's running some tests. And if I go back here, we have a new test running. It knows something's coming, so just it sometimes needs a minute or two just for kind of things to. There we are. Oh, finished. And we can see kind of the same test, and we can even see it running a little bit slower, mostly because you can actually see what's happening now. But we can actually run the same test on BrowserStack, and we can kind of change it. Sorry. There we go. And we can kind of change all the different aspects of this. So in this case, I've kind of in the test base, we had simplified a lot of the stuff to kind of just be Chrome specific, but we could change it to anything because in our tests we have our test capabilities. These are used by like what we're asking for, and so we can ask for things like Windows 10. Oh, that's not what I meant, but Windows 10 and Internet Explorer, OS X and Big Sur, and there's a huge amount of different variation in kind of OS version and browser version. Again, we could also run it against Android, say Android 11 on a Samsung Galaxy 20. Which is really cool. And again, with an iPhone, and say you want an iPhone XS, so kind of the 10s, sorry, because we have the real devices, you can we can kind of use all of this. So that's really important. And earlier I kind of said that we're going to be using we also want to be able to run our tests in parallel. I think this is like, it's very, very important. So kind of we had the BStack single, and we'll just change that to parallel. And so in this case, we're going to run this on, like, we can run this in parallel tests, or we can, because we have a configuration file, we can run this against multiple browsers. And so in this case, this is the test that's going to be run. And we can, it's got like the names of it, and we'll run it. So in this case, I'll just kind of, because it's important, I do think it's very important to kind of run tests in different browsers, and not just be limited to certain things. So clean test -p. Hopefully my copy paste is going to work. So I'll just, what did I type wrong? Oh, I always mistype that. It's not a lowercase p, but it's an uppercase p. So we're going to, there we go. Tests are running. And if I kind of just load up Firefox again, we can see this running on multiple, so kind of, we've got our IE11s running now. The sessions are still running. There's a whole bunch of tests because this repository that I kind of shared out has a whole bunch of different tests, and like for offers, for filters, for users, because it's important to split out your tests by kind of the functionality that it's doing, and how it's doing it. So that's probably going to take a very long time to run, but we don't need to stay and watch it. We'll come back to it in a minute. One of the things I wanted to point out is that, and if you're a Java person, sometimes it's important, not sometimes, it is important to keep track of how your tests are running. So in this case, we can see that a test is passed, and we do this using one of the test listeners because in this case we're using testng, that testng comes with. And so there are in here, we have a test listener, and whenever a test is finished, we can mark a test as pass or failed, so that when you're looking at a UI, we can kind of do the right thing by the user. So that's still running. Okay. I'm just going to cancel that out just for, there's still a bunch of things. And so kind of the sessions will be cleaned up in a minute. So, and so if we go back to the slides and I present, and hopefully it's still there, is the future. I think it's important to kind of be updating Selenium, because Selenium's been around for well over a decade. And so people tend to think, oh, it's obviously not updating with the times, which is not true. The future, so this is Selenium 4, but more things will come along the way, is there are new APIs that are being shared out to people. So relative locators is a new feature that's come out, which allows you to, like, if you know where one element is, and so in our case, we saw there was a grid of devices. If you go, well, I just want all the devices to the top left, you could go, like, you could say to Selenium, please find me any element that is to the top, like above this element and to the left. And it will then go and calculate according to the DOM. And we kind of work out using X and Y coordinates. You might have seen a similar feature in Sahi, which is really cool. Basic authentication support is in there. And so a lot of like testers tend to have their servers behind some form of basic authentication. We've added a new feature which allows us to kind of bypass those using your login details that you put in your test. So they, like, if you've got a super secret website, you can still keep it super secret, and Selenium will now be able to handle it. This is kind of like how Selenium has always been able to support like badly created SSL certificates, was because kind of a lot of testing departments always had to self-sign. Like every other framework nowadays, we've got network interception. I'll kind of show a quick code snippet of that. There are logging for JavaScript errors. So if you want to fail a test automatically when a JavaScript is there, a JavaScript error has been hit, you can do that now in Selenium 4. And if you want to just check console messages, like you can just collect these. This works against all like remote servers. So like if you use a Selenium grid, or you want to use something like BrowserStack, and that you can just use your normal Selenium test, but also kind of augment them with other features. Some of this is only still in beta. Like a lot of these are in Selenium 4 beta, which is still being worked on, but like the features are coming slowly out, and the more kind of we can get there, the better we can try to do that. And so I did promise you to show you a code snippet. I'm not going to run it, but I'll at least show you kind of like, this is a code snippet that's done. And so I've opened a lot of windows today, and I just want to, I have to work my way backwards before I kind of, it's not that one, not that one. Oh, where did I put it? Oh, I had it earlier, so I've lost it. But this is because I closed the wrong. Oh, actually, I closed the. Here we are. So this is kind of with Selenium. This actual Selenium test is that you can create a network interceptor and you can match according to different HTTP responses. And so you can do it for kind of everything. You can change it to how you like, if you want to manipulate it, so you want to block it, or you want to kind of change how the data that's returned. You can do all of this. This is all available in Selenium 4, and if you've not updated to Selenium 4, you should be able to. It's being designed as a drop-in replacement for kind of Selenium users, because a lot of projects, whenever they jump a major version, always tend to break a lot of things, and so people get stuck behind, and we don't want to leave anyone behind. But if you can upgrade, you should be able to do it now. And the next release of Selenium will be a release candidate, so it's just about cleaning up a few bugs. Oh, wrong way. And that is it from my side. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found that useful.
Thanks, David. Great session. Appreciate you tailoring the session and preempting some of the questions that the audience might have. We have a few questions lined up. Folks, if you have questions, you can still add them into the Q&A panel, and we'll be sure to get them answered by David. Before diving into Q&A, just a quick announcement. Our team is running a poll. It's a yes or no question. We'd appreciate if you quickly get that answered. Awesome. Let's get into questions. So I'll start off with questions around features and support. I think the first question is, can I integrate my Selenium automation tests with Jenkins? Maybe you can talk about how.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah, so you can definitely do that. And so I definitely recommend some form of CI system that you use nowadays. Jenkins is tried and trusted. And the way I tend to, if I was setting up a project, is I try create a task for every browser that I want to test against, so that like if you ever have a case where you have something breaking in a specific browser, you don't have one job in Jenkins going red. You kind of have meaning for everything, but you kind of have, like, if you have say 5 or 6 different tasks, you can have a nice pipeline and view it easier, and it can simplify your life that way.
Can we integrate TestRail within this framework to set up reporting online?
Yes, so kind of like with a lot of this is why Selenium has always been designed as a browser automation framework, is that it gives you the tools for automating the browser, and then however you want to manipulate your test runner or things like that, or you want to add in new features, or you want to kind of do visual regression testing or things like that. Selenium will give you the tools for getting you to the browser to the state you want, and then however you want to do your teardowns, your reporting, or everything, that is up to you. But there are also opinionated frameworks around there that also build on top of Selenium to kind of solve some of these things for you. But it's about giving you as much choice as you can. So yes, you definitely probably could.
We have another question. This one's around, can we bypass or handle Zscaler proxy authentication using Selenium?
Yeah, so I've not tried it, but in theory, you should be able to do some of the stuff with the new Selenium 4 APIs. So kind of the same way that basic authentication is done, is that under the hood, what it does is that it will try load a page, and then if it gets a challenge which says please log in, Selenium will catch that challenge and then use the login details. So if you if the request is going to be challenged in that way, it should just work. And again, this is using the new basic authentication APIs in Selenium.
Can I implement custom annotations in Selenium?
Probably. So I've not done that, but like because it's just a library, that's going to manipulate a page. However you want to change things, you should be able to do it. Like, so if you have an annotation that's like kind of will set up a page and then do step, that should be available to you. Truly, the limitation is kind of like when you want more of the browser internals, then Selenium is not necessarily going to have all of that stuff available. It doesn't surface it to you. Like it knows how to access it, but it doesn't surface it to the user.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Few questions, asking on how you would approach things. So when juggling multiple frameworks like Cucumber, TestNG, Maven, how do you decide which test runner is best when there are multiple ways and options? So how would you pick one of these?
So normally, like, so in this case, I use TestNG. JUnit is another really good example. I think when it comes to, so I'll start on the kind of the TestNG and then I'll kind of work out, but like, if it's going to be an assertion library or a testing library, I think the main thing is like, how are you testing your unit tests? How are you kind of to set that up? If you're using JUnit, then kind of keep the same thing through, mostly so that you can kind of get the support of your colleagues to finish off certain bits. And it also helps with ownership, is that if they know the same things, then you can do that. Then kind of like when it comes to Maven and Gradle and things like that, I don't do a lot of Java, but like when I've worked on large projects that I've used Java or C++ or Rust or things like that, the main tool the thing that I'm always thinking about is how much time am I going to be wasting on compilation? And this is also a problem if you're using TypeScript, because it has to do all these like bits and pieces to change it from TypeScript into JavaScript and kind of error and things like that. Is how much time are you going to be wasting on kind of waiting for the computer? There was a engineering productivity manager at Facebook a very long time ago who kind of coined the term of like we should be waiting, like computers should be waiting for humans, not humans waiting for computers. So whenever you try pick these tools like Cucumber or TestNG or Maven or Gradle or any other thing, it's like how can you improve your productivity with kind of getting the computer to wait for you rather than the other way around?
Awesome. We have a question around comparing the differences between running in headless or a headed mode. What are some of the key considerations that I should take into account when deciding between the two? How can I be sure that my test results will be correct with headless mode?
So I'm a big advocate of not using headless mode, mostly because like having worked on Firefox, I know how the headless mode in Firefox works, which is kind of which is more near the real world. It kind of creates like this invisible browser and then kind of, but so it's still rendering, it's still doing all the bits and pieces. With Chromium-based browsers, what they do is they kind of like, if something hits the code paths for rendering the page, it doesn't always do that. So I know kind of like in headless mode, I think in Chromium, last time I checked, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, you couldn't do like video playback in headless mode, which is important on kind of like if you're a Twitch or a YouTube, you need to be able to test those things. So kind of having a real thing. And if there are any little differences kind of like that, your real world users are not going to hit those problems because they don't use headless. So that's why I'm always a big advocate of kind of trying to be as close to a user as possible. And I get that's not always the case. Like we can't always do that, like on on your device, if you're running tests, maybe run it in headless, but then when it goes into CI, it needs to be in a fully fledged browser. Like that's how I would probably approach those, because like you don't want Windows popping up and distracting you all the time.
We have a question around, we've always had difficulty running tests using JavaScript executor for special cases, and this leads to flaky tests. How are we handling this in the future?
As kind of Amir alluded to, like some of the flakiness is differences on the page to kind of the assumptions that were made in the test. And I think kind of like as I pointed out at the beginning, like, you know, Selenium's good in that it gives you other language support, because JavaScript can have a steep learning curve because of its asynchronicity. And I think kind of that asynchronicity and not knowing when certain bits or pieces are going to return can lead to these flakiness. Like in those cases, I think kind of I don't think there's anything any framework can do. So I don't think Cypress could fully solve this. I don't think Puppeteer could fully solve this. And I don't think Playwright could fully solve this, because it starts leading us down the road of like the halting problem, which is a computer science like discussion around kind of like, how do you know when something is done? Because there are multiple versions of the answer for done. And so there's no APIs coming, but if you can kind of try triage and work your way through that problem, then hopefully it'll get rid of the flakiness, because like you can burn in your test, but sometimes you still will get those flakiness.
Thanks, David. So another question. We are upgrading from Selenium 3.141.59 to Selenium 4. What amount of refactoring will be needed?
If I and my team and the rest of the Selenium community have done their job properly, there will be zero refactoring. We have designed it to try be as much of a drop-in replacement as possible. If it's not, and I know there's been a few kind of little hiccups with the way package managers, especially around Java, have been using some of the like our dependencies. But if there are any hiccups, do let us know, because like when we get to the full release of Selenium, it is supposed to be a drop-in replacement. You can just like update your API and away you go. Oh, update your dependency, sorry, and away you go.
Can we use Selenium and rest assured packages together and come up with a single framework?
Probably. I can't see why not. I don't advocate in doing things like that. So like if you're going to be doing like, I like to have my test personally separated by its concerns. So if you're going to be doing REST testing, have that separate to your Selenium tests. If you're going to be doing React component testing, have that separate to kind of your Selenium or anything else. So kind of truthfully, I think kind of sometimes the best setup for tests might be a mixture of Selenium, Puppeteer, Cypress. Like picking the right tool for the right moment is very key. And again, it comes down to like, you know, what is it trying to solve? Having one tool solve everything normally leads to a lot of frustration. And if you can avoid it, I would definitely recommend it.
That's a great segue. We into the next phase of questions. I think we have a few questions around comparing frameworks. And I think you've talked about some of this around the differentiators and where Selenium differs. The first question is around Selenium 4. How does Selenium 4 compare with what other frameworks might have to offer, specifically Cypress and Puppeteer?
So Selenium 4 offers, we've built what we're describing as idealized APIs. And so kind of like with Puppeteer, you have to upgrade your Puppeteer with every version of Chromium that comes out. And we have this problem with Chrome driver because of the underlying technology in Chrome and in Edge changes with each version. And so they have to release a new version each time. And Playwright also suffers from this, is that like you've got to constantly upgrade. What we're trying to do is hide some of that stuff within Selenium, so that if you do the upgrades, it just kind of magically will upgrade everything with you, and you don't have to rewrite your tests. I know when I was at Mozilla, I was supporting some people from Automatic with their Puppeteer tests with Firefox, and they were struggling to do upgrades because of these things. So we're trying to work away from that, and we're working on a thing called the WebDriver BiDi specification. So it's a standard that the Chromium team, Mozilla, Microsoft, and Apple are all collaborating on, so that we can solve this in a better way. So that's like, so we got some similarities coming up with Puppeteer. With Cypress, Cypress is kind of has a really nice debuggability. Like I think that side of it is done really well. But then there are kind of key aspects in the past, and this might still be true. They're like, if you get navigated away to a different page, your Cypress tests stop working, and because of kind of the way it's sandboxed within the JavaScript. But as you've seen, like Cypress is adding network intercept APIs, so is Selenium. Puppeteer's already got it, and Playwright's already got it. But like, there's much of a muchness, I think, with it. But the key differentiator, and Playwright is kind of agreeing with Selenium in this case, is that like having multiple languages support is the most important thing. So that you're not shoehorning everyone into something where they don't feel comfortable or don't necessarily understand the language, and then they struggle, and it kind of makes the web a lot sadder for everyone, really.
Awesome. I'm going to ask you one final question along the similar lines. I think this is really about where you see the market going in, say, 5 years, when some of these other tools sort of gain more share. Currently, research says that Selenium is ahead of other tools. Do you foresee some of these tools overpowering Selenium in terms of end-to-end web automation?
I don't think so. Like, as long as Selenium is still kind of being supported by browser vendors, and browser vendors are adding in features that they need, and so then Selenium will get it. I think kind of in that case, I don't see any key changes. Like, I think there's always going to, like, the user bases, I think, is always going to be expanding. So I did some research at the end of last year. I was kind of I put my product manager hat on, and I kind of helped the Selenium project out with that. And it was like, well, actually, when I look at all the data, in the second half of last year, Selenium user base, or downloads, I should say, which is, it kind of hints towards a user base, but like the amount of downloads that were happening increased by over 25% in every single language. So it's not like, so Selenium is still being used. And so as long as it can kind of keep up with the way the web is going, I think it'll be fine. I think like having that core support from browser vendors is important. So, like with Playwright, it doesn't give you a real Firefox. It gives you like a version that Microsoft have created that works with Playwright. It doesn't actually give you the full Firefox, where Selenium always works with the real Firefox. And same with Playwright with WebKit, right? Like it's using WebKit, it's not actually using Safari. And if you've ever tested something between Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge, you will notice that kind of the way cookies are handled are very different, even though the underlying browser is the exact same. And so you need to be aware of those cases. And sometimes people aren't. It is not like a bad thing if you are only using one or the other, but like there will be potential cases that you miss, and they might be small, but they might also be kind of core things, especially like I'm using cookies as a major example because people care about privacy. So that's where a lot of browsers are starting to differentiate now. And so they might not keep you logged in for as long, or things like that.
Thanks, David. David, appreciate having you on board. As always, appreciate the holistic approach you've taken, adding nuance to the conversation. Thank you very much. Guys, let's give it up for David. quick announcement, folks, before I let you go. We are running an NPS survey. We want to know what you liked, what you think we could do better. Please take the time to answer it. It'll be a Google form that will pop up right after we end this broadcast. With that, that marks the end of day one of BrowserStack Summer of Learning. We will be back next week on July 7th for 2 more talks, one on Nightwatch and the other one on WebDriver.io. 2 exciting sessions still in the pipeline, so hope to see you then. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for tuning in to BrowserStack Summer of Learning, day 1. This is Jay Dave, your host, signing off for the day. See you next week. Thank you very much.